and roll.
Okay, so just so everyone knows, this will be recorded so you can watch it later if you would like to. We'll also have it posted after the webinar on our social media, and so please share it as well. So hello everyone, and welcome to the fourth webinar in our free webinar series. Today's 30-minute webinar is called Leading with Compassion, a Requirement of Leaders Today. My name is Jessica Van Grood, and I'm here with my co-facilitator, Lona Smart. Before we started, I have just a couple of things to go over. So first, we have put a link in the chat. Jot that down, and that is for next Thursday's webinar. It's called There's No Such Thing as Work-Life Balance, and Anna from our office and I will be co-facilitating that, and the registration for that is now open. Second, as we go through today's webinar, we're going to be utilizing this chat feature. So if you haven't found that yet, just scroll over the bottom of your screen and you'll see an icon for that to turn it on. If you have questions, please enter them there and we'll be monitoring them and can answer them as we go. So with those two items out of the way, I'm going to hand it over to Lona to get us kicked off.
Perfect. Thanks, Jess, for giving us telling us some of those housekeeping items. So we're so glad that you are here today. I truly believe that this is one of the most important topics that we are going to cover in the webinar series, and I'll tell you why more here in a minute. But if you lead people, this is the foundation of leadership. It's how we build teams. It's how we connect with our teams. It's really how we get results that we're hoping to get when we're working with our teams. So I'm going to give us today some background information on what exactly compassion is. It may not be what we have previously thought. So how do we define it and why it's so important to leadership and to really have within our organizations. Okay, with that. If my slides will change, there we go. Okay, so compassion is not the same thing as empathy, okay? Though the concepts are related, because empathy refers to our ability to take on the perspective of someone else and to really feel the emotions of another person. But that's where empathy stops and compassion starts. So compassion is when we have those feelings and thoughts, but then it also includes the desire to help. So to demonstrate compassion, we must first notice when someone else is struggling. And we can't assume that someone else will tell us when they're struggling. Not everyone is really open about what they're going through. This could be work-related or personally. So the key word there is notice. We have to notice when someone else is struggling, when something is different about them, right? And then we have to be able to put ourselves in their shoes. We almost have to be able to feel the way that they're feeling to understand where they're coming from. So you become truly compassionate if you take all of that and then you act and you do something about it. So people are dealing with all kinds of stuff right now. They're juggling work and life responsibilities. There's fears about the future, and all of these things create stress and requires leaders to step up and be more compassionate. So we've always, whoops, sorry, my slides are giving me a hard time today. So I think most people recognize that compassion in general is a good thing. We've always thought about compassion when we're talking about nonprofits or helping others in need, but compassion actually has some professional benefits as well. So it's a foundational part of component to building a high-performing team and really building a healthy organization. So organizational studies have actually looked at compassion in organizations, and they found that organizations with authentic compassion, where that prevails, employees actually have reduced stress. They have more job satisfaction. And employees who have a compassionate leader are also more likely to be more compassionate to others and cooperate more with their coworkers, which is obviously good for the entire organization. But what's this link between compassion and organizational results? So here's some of the background information on that. Our brains are predisposed for social interactions. We need that social interaction. In fact, we function better when we have some of that positive psychology going on, or positive emotions going on. So our frontal cortex, right, this part of our brain up here, which allows us to think, to make good decisions, to think long term. It also is the same place where we develop empathy, where we feel empathy. So we can contemplate how someone else is going to act and behave, and then we can adjust our behaviors accordingly. It also allows us to show empathy, to share another person's emotion. And that empathy and social connection is actually really connected to oxytocin, which is a hormone that we know, if you're familiar with it. It has a lot of other positive effects, like it builds trust. It helps people collaborate. It helps us, we're more motivated to act in a positive way. It also reduces anxiety. So when we demonstrate compassion as a leader, there's kind of this cyclical effect, right? So we're compassionate and empathetic towards other people, and they in turn are more likely to be compassionate and empathetic to others, again, which just helps the whole team, right? But what does it mean to be a compassionate leader, right? What things do we have to do to be a compassionate leader? It's really not about being nice. And so I want to make sure we're not confusing those two things. It's not just about being nice. It's really, compassionate leaders are self-motivated. So think about this. If you're not working as hard or harder than those that report to you, you're not being very compassionate, right? That doesn't come across as a compassionate leader. You have to be self-motivated to get things done, to get results, all of those things. You have to be able to influence behavior in a positive way, to bring out the best in other people. It's also, so being nice, kind of, I've used that term a couple times, it's not about being nice. Being nice doesn't build long-term trust in relationships. It's deeper than that. It takes more than that. So it requires us to really care about people. You can't fake it. You're going to hear us use a few times throughout this webinar the word authentic. You have to be authentic. You have to actually care about people in order to make them feel safe and comfortable around you. They don't need, if they're spending a lot of time second guessing our intentions, then it's not going to feel authentic to them. They know you're just faking it. So this applies professionally and personally. Okay, so when we care about others, we don't just care about, we're going to talk a little bit today about their personal lives, because we know we're all kind of struggling with some things personally, but professionally as well. When you really care about somebody, you also want them to be successful at work. You want to help them, because it feels good to be productive and meet our goals and to do the right things. So you want to help them do that, which means sometimes you have to have difficult conversations. You have to coach your team, but not to coach them in a way that's judgmental, but to coach them in a way to help them be successful. So we take responsibility for our team's success, the individual success of those on our team, the good and the bad, okay? So now we've explored the difference between compassion and empathy, right? They're not exactly the same thing. We've shared some examples of why it's so important to the success of your team and to our organizations. But Jess is actually going to take a deep dive into 4 strategies of some very specific things that you can do to be a more compassionate leader. So these include showing you care, demonstrating respect, being present and visible, and having your team's back. And if you do these 4 things authentically, right, you're going to be on the right track. But we really wanted to boil this down to what are some very tangible things that you can do. So we're going to walk through some examples of this. Jess is going to lead that. During this time, I'm going to also monitor the chat. So we're going to kind of switch places here. I'm going to monitor the chat. And if you have ideas or things that maybe you've done in the past, or maybe some examples of things that somebody else has done for you that you feel are good examples of compassion, feel free to go ahead and share those in the chat, and then I will report out periodically as Jess goes through the rest of the webinar here. All right, Jess, I'll let you take it.
Thanks, Lana. First, I'm going to apologize for any background noise that you do hear. As many of you know, we're all kind of working from home right now, so apologies in advance if something gets interrupted here. So let's talk about being purposeful, about showing that you care. So this means, like Lana said, that it's the ability to see someone's pain, but also be willing and able to help them find a solution or make it better in some way. And you really do have to be authentic about it, like she said. A small gesture can go a really long way. For instance, if you have an employee who's been out sick, just pick up the phone and call them, but don't ask about work. Don't talk about work. Simply ask how they are doing. You don't have to pry. Ask if they need anything. Just be genuine and be sympathetic, and that can really mean the world to someone. And like Lana said, it's first more about being observant. You have to use a little bit of that emotional intelligence and pick up on those things. And when you're observant, you can notice and identify those pain points. And then that's what gives you the motivation to act. We understand that many times you cannot physically solve a problem for someone. But what are some of the things that you can do? So let's say an employee is dealing with the loss of a loved one. Obviously, we cannot ever bring that person back. But there are things that you can do, like sending a handwritten note, sending flowers, or just reaching out. For example, actually, I'm going to tell you another quick story about a time that someone was very compassionate toward me. And this is about Courtney from our office. She is one of the most compassionate people I've ever met. In fact, she should probably honestly be facilitating this webinar because she's got it down. But the year I turned 30, it was a really tough year for me. Just a lot of different things going on, and turning 30 just kind of added to it. And in my head for all these years, I've had this list of all these things that I wanted to accomplish before I turned 30. And as I knew that my 30th birthday was approaching, I was venting to Courtney that I didn't do this, I didn't publish that book, I didn't do that. I felt like a failure. And she listened to me, and of course she said the things that everyone's supposed to say. Jess, you're not a failure. You're so successful, you've done things. But on my 30th birthday, Courtney gave me a list of 30 things that I had accomplished. And I read it and I just cried, and it gave me such a different perspective. One, the fact that she knew so much more about me than I ever thought. And two, the fact that she took the time to literally type them all out for me. And then I even made her email it to me so I could keep it forever. And it's a constant reminder for me of, maybe things didn't go as planned, but because she was so compassionate, it changed my perspective. She really is. She's one of the most, I guarantee everyone in our office probably has a compassionate Courtney story. But I'm gonna ask Lana. Lana, what about you? Is there any examples of a time when someone showed compassion toward you?
Yeah, I have a Courtney story too, but we probably shouldn't go on and on about Courtney, how great she is. Actually, so the story that comes to mind for me is a time when I was going down to Missouri, and I had left, as you guys know, we have like these final celebration plaques that we give to people when they finish a program, a leadership program. And I took off for Missouri, and I was about 2 hours into the trip, and I had left, I realized it just hit me, I'd left all the plaques here. So I actually called the office in a panic, and Andrea, who is our owner and president of this company, got in her car, and we kind of both drove till we met. And she never once, I think I was in the first year of starting, she never once like got mad at me or upset or frustrated or anything. And I was absolutely mortified that I had done this, and she'd gone out of her way to bring those to me. That was absolutely a great example of demonstrating compassionate. She could have been angry or upset. I didn't do what I was supposed to do. I didn't check my list of things that I should take before I left. Like, it was my responsibility. And she totally stepped up and helped me out, and never once made me feel horrible about it at all. In fact, we laugh about it now still a little bit. So somebody in our chat said, during times when we're disconnected, it's even more important to take time out of the Zoom calls to be intentional about the people on the call. I love that. Like, take a few minutes to connect with everyone before diving into business. We at our office, we've been getting on a virtual coffee chat in the mornings for, anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes. And we use that time to just say, like, what's going on in each other's lives? Like, how was your night? How are your kids? How are you doing? And so it's less about like, what do you need from me today to get the work done? And it's more focused on just how are we doing? Because we all need that right now. So a couple other examples, if you don't mind me continuing, Jess,
Absolutely,
that are
go for it.
there. Sending a photo that will make someone smile. So I think of like, funny little videos or photos that make someone smile. Someone wrote giving somebody, a gift card to their favorite coffee shop. That's a good one. Coffee shops usually, most of them are still working like drive-through, which is good. So telling your boss something great that a teammate did. So actually not just thanking that teammate, but telling another person that you appreciate it, that's cool. Shout out on social media, right? So publicly acknowledging that person and their effort and what they're doing to make them feel good. So yeah, small acts of kindness. It's a big thing.
Yes.
All right, Jess, I'll turn it back to you. Go ahead.
Any small act of kindness can really make such a huge difference, and you really don't even know it until after you do it. So
Yep.
Those things, jot them down in the chat, keep them coming. Those are great ideas.
Yep.
So next, it is incredibly important that you demonstrate respect. And when we say demonstrate respect, that is in both your actions and in your expectations. Mm-hmm. We all have a job to do. And sometimes, especially now, many of us have ended up taking that work home. But things will get back to a new normal eventually. Obviously, none of us have a clear end date, but they will. So let taking work home be the exception and not the rule. Don't ask employees to adjust their hours because that's what you're doing. For instance, let's say if they're on PTO, don't bother them with questions about work unless it's truly an emergency. Don't expect them to respond to late night text messages or late night emails. Just realize that even today, people have lives outside of the work, even though that they are so closely related. Leading with compassion really means showing that you care about people's values and respecting their time. So today, more than ever, like I said, work and home are pretty much coexisting. So offer grace and offer flexibility and be respectful of other people's times and conflicting demands. If you need to meet with someone, find out what time works for them. And it's not just saying, okay, we're gonna meet at 11, but make sure it's a time like maybe where their kids are eating lunch or otherwise entertained, or where that person's not also trying to accomplish a lot of other things. And on that same note, make sure that you also specify times that work for you, because even though sometimes it may not feel like it, you too have a life outside of work. And then always be willing to lend an ear with patience. You have to be present in conversations, and you have to do your best to attentively listen. Sometimes that might just be to let team members vent. Whether in the middle of a pandemic or not, people go through rough patches sometimes. So just listen with patience and empathy. And next, work to be like Planet Fitness. I got this one from Lona. She says, we've all seen those commercials where they're like, this is a no judgment zone. And it's true, work to be like Planet Fitness. It's really easy to pass judgment on someone else, especially when you don't have the whole story. Every person could be fighting a battle that you know nothing about. We've put that on these 4 slides because it's so incredibly important, and it's something that we should all remember. So if someone needs to end their day early, don't pass judgment. If their house is messy on a Zoom call, don't pass judgment. We're all in different places in our lives, and we're all dealing with our own personal things. So try to put yourself in their shoes and try to remember that at some point or another, you probably needed someone to be compassionate toward you too. Finally, ask for feedback, and ask for feedback about yourself, about team initiatives, about current processes. Seek out the perspective of others. So with this one, it's important that you make it safe for people. You won't actually get candid feedback if you don't make it safe. So you have to actually invite the feedback and let them know that there's no retaliation, and you have to listen to them with an open mind. So what's working? What's not? What could be improved? What do you need from me? Is there anything that I can do better? Simply even just thinking about how your own actions and behaviors might affect others or how it might make them feel could actually lead you to ask better questions. So Lana, do you have any other thing that's coming from the chat right now? No? No?
Nope, you're good.
Okay, perfect. So we will move on. So in the next slide, we're probably going to ask you to do some stuff in the chat. So let's talk about being visible and being present. Those two words are not one and the same. They sound the same. They could have similar definitions, but they're not. So part of relationship building, as Lana talked about, is really learning about your people. And you can't do that by secluding yourself into your workspace and not talking to anyone. If you want full trust and team engagement, then you have to take time to work on those relationships. Even if you have to schedule yourself to do it, take 15 minutes a day and go out and just learn something new about a team member or an employee. And when you're in a work environment, or when we're all back in a work environment that allows us to be around others, you can't just walk by, ask about their kids, and move on without actually listening. This kind of goes back to being authentic and being present. So it's so important to learn the little things about your team, kind of like Courtney learned about me in the story that I told earlier. Know who their significant other is. Know their children's names. Know where they grew up, where they went to school, what hobbies they have. And you can learn these things simply by walking around. You can do them in meetings. You can, like group meetings, one-on-ones, Zoom calls, chat, whichever works for you and your team, especially right now. So now I want to challenge you to try and do something on your next virtual team meeting. Not only could it help it make it just a little bit more interesting, but I think it could also invite trust, which in turn makes the conversation more effective. So on the screen, you'll see a few suggestions for questions, such as, what's your favorite possession? Are you an early bird or night owl? What's your take on reality TV? Tell me about the best day of your life. So using the chat, I'd invite you to type in questions that either you and your team have tried already that worked well, or ideas for things that you could ask your team but haven't yet. The more we get to know our people, the more likely we are to trust them and give them the benefit of the doubt. And it makes it so much easier to show compassion. So go ahead and start entering those. And again, Lana will be monitoring and kind of interrupting as they come through.
Yes, and just I did want to add, we had one more thing come through chat I just want to share with the whole group. It just came to us. Somebody wrote that being remote has really been a challenge. It's sometimes hard to realize when your coworkers are feeling down or stressed. So I have found I really have to listen to what they aren't saying just as much as what they are saying. I think that is really, really sound advice, to kind of read between the lines and try to pick up and notice what maybe is going on that they're not verbalizing. So that's really good suggestions there.
And that definitely goes back to the EQ. And we have another webinar on that that's posted on our social, and it's also posted on the resource page on our website. And we'll make sure to put that link to the resource page as well. It's just kind of just a list of things that we've found helpful, or free softwares, and of course these free webinars as well. It's so much harder to kind of dive into that EQ and being able to sense things when you're not actually face-to-face with people. So thank you for that comment. So finally, this last one is so incredibly important. You have to stand behind your team. You always have to have their back. So it is so easy to be encouraging and motivating when things are going really, really well, right? But we need to stand behind our team even when things aren't going well. When things go wrong, sometimes we as human beings automatically jump to search for whose fault it was or who can we blame. But instead, stop yourself and say, what is my perspective here? Am I trying to blame and protect, or am I trying to grow and understand? So show loyalty, take responsibility, even if it's something that you didn't do but your team did. Take responsibility for that and become an advocate for your team. Figure out what can be learned rather than who to punish. So to support others, you might start by focusing on strengths. Some people just have a knack for certain things. And it's so important to know what those are, especially for those that you manage or those that are on your team. For example, we wouldn't ask an outgoing salesperson to sit in a cubicle all day and not talk to anyone. This type of person is someone who really thrives on human interaction, and that in turn is what makes them successful. So find ways to utilize your strengths and remember that your employees really don't have to be a jack of all trades. Next, offer verbal encouragement. There is a phrase that has been attributed to Simon Sinek and a few others, and that is, what gets rewarded gets repeated. So reward the good things, offer encouragement, and be their biggest cheerleader. Especially when you know that someone could be struggling, a few kind words really do go a long way. And it's amazing what people accomplish when they know that you believe in them.
Awesome, Jess. I have a couple of things from chat I wanna update you guys on. So somebody shared that they do an anniversary gift with that person's favorite snacks and drinks for the day, which is a great idea. It's because it's personalized, and I think that's the important part there is you can, if you give everybody the same snack, the same cupcakes or whatever on their anniversary, it's not quite as meaningful as actually finding out what that person's favorite things are. And that's a good example, another example of what Courtney is really good at.
Yes.
Courtney in our office here, I had a rough week and had a long trip ahead of me, and she had packed up kind of a care package for me to take along with me on this drive. And it was like, I think she called my husband to find out like what my favorite snacks were, my daughter or somebody, but she took the time to find out what my favorite things were. So it personalizes it, right? Mm-hmm. And then someone else shared, and this is a really meaningful statement here. I think the question to ask yourself is, what is it like to be on the other side of your leadership? So what's it like to be on the other side of you as a leader? Our staff is paying attention to how we are leading them through this, and they will remember this. Yeah, these are key moments where our staff are looking at us like, are we showing up? Are we being there? Are we there for them? Are we helping them get through this? And so these are key moments in our leadership. So
absolutely, that is huge. What you do today will be remembered tomorrow.
Yep.
And that
Absolutely.
really leads me into the last point here, which is inspiring others. So you have to work to be inspiring and motivating. And that doesn't mean that you have to start out each day with a motivational speech on your virtual coffee. But along with encouraging others, you have to be someone who is also inspiring. So when you're visible and you're present, like we talked about earlier, you learn those things about people, and you also learn what motivates them. So take the time to jot those things down so that you can pull them out when people really need it the most. You can inspire others through your own actions. So as a leader, people look to you. So if you're getting frustrated with people easily or being short on conversations, they're going to notice. However, if you're doing the opposite, they'll notice that too. So lead by example. And then the next thing you really need to do is to take action. So I am going to refer back to Lona and let her just wrap this up for us.
Would love to. And you guys will have to forgive me. You might have noticed that our lights around here are on auto. So when I sit still for too long, they shut off. So bear with me there. It's about every 10 minutes they're shutting off. It's great. Okay, so we started our webinar today discussing the difference between empathy and compassion, right? And the difference lies in action. So here's your chance, right? We get to take action. So I was on a webinar earlier this week, and I thought this was a really great idea. They said, get out your phone, text yourself one thing that you're going to do to take action on what we've talked about today. And I did that. And then I had that as a reminder as I'm going through my text messages later in the week. It was a great idea. So I encourage you all to do that. Because these behaviors need to become part of our day-to-day habits. Doing it once is not enough, right? Being compassionate one time with your team doesn't really build that long-lasting, deep relationship that those trusting relationships. So we got to make it part of our daily practice. And for some of us, it's not easy to show emotion. right? It doesn't come naturally to us to really connect with people because maybe we're more of an introvert or we're just maybe more of a private person. That's okay. Step outside of your comfort zone a little bit, right? Be vulnerable with your team and let them know that this is not your normal, like this isn't easy for you either. I think they'll appreciate your honesty with that and your vulnerability.
Well,
But
and
if we
even
want to
on
get,
that same note, Lana, you know, I consider myself an introvert, and
Mhm,
I'm not as comfortable doing it in a group setting, but
right.
I get to know each other, it's just so much easier. So do it in a way that's comfortable for you.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Yep. You got to make it kind of your own, right? And that goes back to being authentic. You have to find what works for you as a leader. And each of us is a little different. We have a little different style. But this is one of the most important things we do as a leader, right? It's one of the most important aspects of our jobs. So if you want to get the best results out of your team, you really, it requires you to lead with compassion, sorry if I could talk. Make sure that you're the kind of manager that people will want to work for and people will give you their best. That's just how it works, right? Um, so I grew up with my mother preaching the golden rule. I'm sure many of you did as well. Like treat others how you want to be treated, right? When I was fighting with my brother, like treat your brother how you want to be treated. But I heard something this week by Marcus Buckingham, and I thought it really resonated with me. He said that treat people the way that they want to be treated, not how you want to be treated, right? Which requires us to do some of the things that we talked about today. It requires us to notice others, to notice them and see them, their real selves, put ourselves in their shoes, and then act with compassion accordingly. So thank you so much for joining us. We're actually a couple minutes over our time today. We continue to host weekly webinars. We invite you to join us. Next week, our topic is there's no such thing basically as work-life balance. Ashta and Jessica will be leading that. They have real life experience with what it's like to try to juggle the work and life situation right now, which is not easy. So same time next Thursday, join us. The link is in the chat, so copy paste that now if you can before you log out. Otherwise, you can go to Eventbrite or our social media and you can find it there as well. If you have a specific question or want more information on a topic that we haven't covered yet, just as a reminder, we have a ton of content on our website. It includes blogs, vlogs, other free resources. And if you're like me, you actually benefit from some daily reminders of things to keep in mind, which if you follow us on social media, Courtney is great at getting that stuff out on a daily basis. Thank you for joining us. Hope to see you next week. Have a good one. Take care. Thank you. Stay safe.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.